Welcome to Built for This, the podcast where property meets purpose. I'm Talia Hugh.
And I'm Megan Rovers. Together we're here to unpack the real stories behind the people shaping the property industry. From bold first steps to career-defining moments and the life lessons they've built along the way.
If you're passionate about property, curious about the human side of success, or just looking to build something meaningful, you're in the right place.
So let's unpack it. Welcome to Built for This.
Today on Built for This, we're joined by Morgan Owen, Director and Founder of Penny Finance. Morgan's story is one of grit, growth, and backing yourself even when the path isn't clear. She shares how her upbringing shaped her drive, the unexpected start to her career in the fitness industry, and the ups and downs that pushed her toward the world of finance. What began as a tough initiation into the industry ultimately became the spark behind Penny Finance, a business that's now helping many people feel confident, educated, and in control of their money. Let's get into her journey, the lessons she's learned along the way, and how she's paving the way for women in finance. So let's unpack it. Welcome to Built for This.
Welcome to this week's episode of Built for This. We are joined by Morgan Owen from Penny Finance. What I would like to do is just start on a little bit of a journey back in time. So for those who don't know, both Morgan and I are from Shepparton originally. So I thought it'd be a nice segue to get a little bit of an understanding from you what are some of those foundations that you kind of learned and how you ended up in the big world of finance from a small regional town.
Yeah, country kid. And I don't know about you, but once I did move to Melbourne, people kind of treated you differently, which was ideal because I was coming into a world that I had absolutely no idea about. But look, growing up, I think it's fair to say I just never quite felt like I fitted in. But I also wasn't vocal about that. One thing I've come to understand about myself is I am very much a chameleon. So I can and will adapt to any and all of my environments as necessary to um I was calling it thrive, but apparently it's just surviving. Well, you figure that stuff out later. But yeah, I think I don't know, just and look, I had a wonderful childhood. Right? My parents are awesome, my family's awesome. Yes, they separated and I was, part of a broken family and then parents are remarrying and new partners and new siblings and yes, all that happened. I had some tragedy that happened at school as well with, my first boyfriend being shot and killed. I don't know if that's something you guys are aware of, but um it was rough. Like there's lots of really awful, awful things that happened, but also for the most part, a wonderful upbringing. But I still just never felt like that was going to be me. Unlike my sisters and my family who are very well established there, I was like, get me the F out of here.
Yeah. And we won't go into too much detail about some of that tragedy that you did face at school and those types of things. But I guess what are some of those things now looking back on reflection? It sounds like you do look backwards, which sometimes is the best way to go forwards. What are some of those lessons or things that you feel like were really pivotal in the way you do things now that you kind of learned at what sounds like a very young age?
Look, my parents are very hard workers, both of them. And so my work ethic, I can't really put it down to anything else other than them. I was the firstborn. My parents were quite young when they had me. Money was not free flowing and therefore both had to work. I think they were definitely part of that generation as opposed to their parents beforehand where, women stayed home, men went to work, all of those old school traditional ways of doing things like that was not the way that I was raised. And I was raised that I could and be and do whatever I wanted. And so that's good and bad because that's a really really super, 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 super high expectation, right? And I mean, I put that on myself now as much as anyone ever put that on me. Um, but it has led me to work really hard. So I feel like I'm a nice mix of both my parents. My mum's much more of what I would say a risk taker. She's moved around. She's tried a lot of different things. She's done well at certain things. Some things have worked, some things that haven't. Whereas my dad is the completely stable, been in the same my dad's a fireman and he was always going to be a fireman. His brother's a fireman, my cousin's a fireman, my grandpa was a fireman. That was always the way that it was going to go, and it was just a matter of when he was gonna get in, and he got in very young. He was actually the youngest recruit ever. I think I don't have that stat wrong, and he's only just retiring now. When I say he's only just retiring, he's actually quite young to be retiring, and I'm ever so slightly concerned about that. But he made it all the way up to deputy chief, and he's again one of the hardest workers and just like a hero, really. Like what he does for work, and he does it. There's no complaints coming out of him. He's incredible with other humans. So as is my mom. So a lot of my empathy, I think, stems from the two of them, and definitely the work ethic as well. So I don't really put that down to necessarily being a country kid,
Mm.
but we also did lots of cool things. You know, we rode road bikes, we went horse riding, we didn't live on a farm. We kind of lived in the town, so got a nice mix of best of both worlds, I think.
So then, Morgan, you from Shepparton, you've moved to Melbourne, was it, to do fitness? And then that was it fitness and nutrition at uni that you originally chose?
So when I was at school, I don't know, Megs, if you had this happen with the school, like at school when they're teaching you, like essentially how to plan your career and plan your subjects and what you're going to do with your life. I vividly remember that. I remember sitting in front of the computer and the teacher sort of coming over to me and being like, what subjects are you going to choose? And feeling like, how the hell are you supposed to know what you're going to do with your life when you're like 16 years old? And so then what they do is they tell you to pick things that you're interested in, right? Like what interests you. And at that point in time, all I did was play sport. If I wasn't at school,
Mhm.
I was playing sport. And so, fitness and, food and all of that stuff was just kind of a very big part of my life. They also were kind of saying I needed to either be a doctor or a nurse or a lawyer, like teacher, those were pretty much your options. And that sounded absolutely awful to me. I was like, I don't want to do any of those things. Like, no disrespect to anyone who does those amazing, incredible jobs. But again, like I just couldn't see that being me. So then I was like, okay, what now? So I'm trying to do this research, trying to figure it out. And where I landed was becoming a dietitian. And so then through the later part of high school, I was picking the subjects, chemistry and like all the things that were going to lead me off to do that. With year 12, as hard as I worked, and this is what it was like for me. I was a very, very hard worker, but I was never, ever, ever the top student, never in a million years. And it used to annoy me, the ones that were so smart and they would get all the best marks and they didn't even have to work for it. They used to drive me absolutely bonkers. Anyway, that was most certainly not me. So I got enough marks to get into not straight dietetics and not straight dietetics in Melbourne. I got into dietetics in a university called Charles Sturt, which was in Wagga Wagga. And I got like a full blown scholarship, whole thing, whole shebang to go there. But I was hell bent on going to Melbourne. And so I forewent that and chose a crappier degree uh, just to go to Melbourne, and one that I now have a Hexted from too, ironically. So it's the interesting decisions we make when we're children. Hence why I just don't think that that necessarily should be all in our control to decide that. But anyway, so could have gone to Charles Sturt, could have done dietetics. Instead, I went to Melbourne, and that's where this, I suppose the next part of the journey starts because I moved there. I had no place to live. I had no friends, knew nothing, knew no one. But I went and I was like, I'm gonna figure it out as I go. And I did. I did that, started uni, but interestingly, most of the people that I went to uni with that I became friends with didn't live around that area. And so then I'm beginning to realize just how large Melbourne is.
Mhm.
And so then on the weekends, my friends that I was at uni with during the week weren't around. And so I wasn't hanging out with them on the weekend. And then I was like by myself and I was very homesick. And so mum suggested, why don't you go play basketball? Because that's what I'd always done. I'd always played sport. She's like, go join a basketball team. And that'll be a way to meet local people that you can then hang out with on the weekends. Great idea, mum. So that's what I went and did.
That's awesome, and I really feel like you kinda hit the nail on the head there and, kind of coming from a regional spot where I feel like there's 2 kind of, places you would put. You were either put in academic category or you're put in the sporty category, and if you're into sport, then you would be, in nutrition or do be PE teacher or something like that, or academic lawyer, kind of white collar jobs, and business ownership or that world just wasn't really exposed. Like I remember actually, I don't know if you guys had the same book. There was a book and it had all the occupations you could choose. And I'm like, I wonder, like looking at that now, whether that was like a whether, business ownership was one of them, even mortgage broking, all those sorts of things. So it is interesting, but yeah, I went down a similar path going to uni. In hindsight, you kind of go, well, I'm not necessarily using that degree, but it's just so sliding door moments that you go, but for that, then would you have ended up in Melbourne? And if you weren't in Melbourne, then would you end up in finance? So how did you go from uni doing the course that you were doing there into finance?
So, as I mentioned, I picked the crappier degree. And so then
Mhm.
I got to the end of my third year, and it had been promised to me the whole time that it would be a laneway into dietetics, right? And so it was the 3-year degree, and then I just needed to do the last year of the masters to get the dietetics and 4 years of uni, and I was going to be done. And that was the story they told us the whole time, all the way up until the 3rd year, and then they're like, "Oh, actually, by the way, no, that's not really how it's going to work. You're gonna have to do a whole 'nother 3 years to get the dietetics degree." I lost my shit. Categorically lost my shit, to the point where I was like, "I quit. I'm not doing this." So I finished that 1st degree. I got into honors, and I was going to do that next year, and the first day I turned up and they put me in a lab jacket, I was like, "Definitely not. This is not gonna be me." I just absolutely not. I left. I hung it back up and I walked out. I was like, "Gotta figure something else out." So then I remember being at home, being on sick, and just kind of trolling and being like, "What am I gonna do with my life?" I've got this somewhat degree now, which at the time was called, um, food science and nutrition majoring no, yeah, food science and nutrition majoring in something else. I can't even remember. I've tried to block it out of my memory. Um, but but also I put myself through uni generally at that time too, because 'cause I'd moved to Melbourne, obviously I had to pay rent, and so I was working, like, multiple jobs, and so I kinda switched my focus to property. I kinda switched my focus to, I just wanna buy my first house. In order for me to buy my first house, I'm gonna have to get a job and some decent money. And I was working at Rebel Sport, and I was working at Telstra at the time, so I'd had lots of sales experience. I'd always done well at whatever job I had. I was a bit of a teacher's pet, and then I was a boss's pet, and always did all the things that they needed me to do. So I wasn't necessarily lacking any confidence that I could get a job. It was just kind of getting something that felt, meaningful. I was ready for like a career as opposed to what I thought was like kind of like a uni job. Again, no disrespect, but I was ready for sort of the next level. And anyway, scrolling through SIG, and I come across this gym manager job, and I'm reading through, and I'm looking at the skills that you need, the requirements of the job. And I was like, I could do that. 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 Meanwhile, I don't have any experience with any of those things. I was like, screw it. I feel like I could do it. And so I put in the application, and next day or two, get a call from the general manager who's hiring for it, wanting me to come in for an interview. I was stoked. This wasn't the only job I applied for, by the way. I also applied for a few jobs in nutrition, like food sciencey sort of jobs, but I wasn't vibing any of them. Like literally talked to myself. Like I went into the interviews and talked them out of giving me the job. Like I was like, "You're gonna want to hire me, but please don't, because I'm gonna hate it." And so then, but with this fitness job, this manager role, I don't know, there was just something in me that I was like, this seems exciting, it seems like a challenge. And so I pretty much sat across from the GM and just convinced him that I could do it. That was all I did. I was like, look, I get it. I'm young. And I was like, what I was like 20 at the time. I know I'm young, but there is nothing you can throw at me that I won't figure out. And this is what I'm saying to him. Little did I know at the time, he was like he had only just been hired, and so he was fretting for his job too. So this and, like, you can only imagine he's then turned around to the GM or the MD or whoever it was at the time being like, "I've just hired this 20-year-old. She's got 0 experience." They would have been like, "No, what have you done? This needs to be a success." Because it ended up being the first company studio that Jets Fitness was opening. Everything prior to that had been a franchise. And so they were kind of doing a switch up with the model, hiring sort of middle management, hiring gym managers, PTs, so on and so forth. So anyway, I ended up becoming the first manager of the first company, Jets Gym. And we sold the shit out of it. Absolutely sold so many memberships all prior to opening. We had this booth set up inside the shopping center, and I was just handing out memberships like they were going out of fashion. I was just, I don't know, I just had a gift of the gap, and everyone was signing up. So the whole town, before we knew it, was ready to come and join us. And then I'll also know that part was easy. Signing people up, doing the deals, that part's easy. And I'm even like that now. Then it came time for the day that we opened, and I was like, huh, what do I do? Sorry, I'm just getting a copy delivered, guys. So,
So
okay.
good.
Yeah. I was like, what do we do? Like, okay, people are going to come in. Now we've actually got to like get their like, gym card to get them in the door. It's a 24-hour gym. I'm going to have to tour them around. Like, oh my goodness, like what do I actually do? And I had gone through some training, but I was like, oh, it doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Actually turn up on the day. I'm like, holy shit. So anyway, the first few was a little bit rocky, but everyone knew me by that point. Everyone was being very kind and generous. And so anyway, that went really well. And so very quickly, I wasn't just hiring one gym. Oh, sorry, I wasn't just managing one. They promoted me to like a regional position. I was managing 5 and recruiting in managers and PTs at that time. And all of a sudden, I kind of got to this point in my career where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for the next move. So it was about 3 years later. And that's when KX came knocking. So KX Pilates was the next brand that I went to, and they kind of seeked me out. I can't exactly remember how, but they'd heard about me somehow, somewhere. I think maybe via a mutual connection, and suggested that I would go into their national franchise manager role. So I bluffed my way through that one too, guys, just so you know. Absolutely well and truly. But I got it, and spent so much time just with the franchise owners at the time who were feeling unheard and a little bit frustrated. I just spent a whole lot of time chatting with them, figuring out what they needed. And I was at KX for must have been another 3 or 4 years before then finance came after that.
That's awesome, and what I like about that is kind of the diverse skill set you get from kind of the fast pace from the gym industry that would relate right into finance. The moving parts of having, franchise owners and then members and kind of being that middle person in that transaction almost to be like, "Okay, we've got to make sure that everyone from KX is happy." That's yeah, I can see how then that experience and skill then got transferred straight into finance.
Oh, for sure. And it goes all the way back to my early, early, early jobs. Like, we're in the business of connection, people. Like,
Mm.
this is life. Meet people where they are, understand where they're trying to get to, and help them do it. And that's can be related to almost anything and everything that you do. You just got to care enough to understand where people are at.
I'd just love to know because you touched on before, when you did go into jets, you wanted to get into property? During that period, is that when you started to get into property, and is that sort of where that begun for you?
You're exactly right. I did. Yeah. So started working at Jets. My salary was nothing to write home about. So I knew I had to just save and save and save and save and save. So I moved in with my aunt and uncle at the time, stopped paying rent, just stripped out all of my expenses and just plugged away as much as I could. I also went on Deal or No Deal with my mum, and we won 8 grand.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's great.
That was cool, so that helped. And then my dad actually went guarantor for me as well. So I had a whole bunch of help, but for the most part, obviously I had to work, had to save, had to have the income. And yes, while I was at Jets, after the first probably 18 months, I think it probably took me to save, I bought my first place.
Amazing. And how long ago was that? Because you mentioned you were early 20s.
Yeah, it would have been 21 at the time.
Yeah.
So that
That's awesome. Well done. Yeah. In hindsight now, do you just think like that's wild? Like if you were talking to a 21-year-old, would you like if you had that opportunity again, you'd be like, this is wild now with just the changes in interest rates and those types of things.
what? It is interesting that you ask it like that because then my interest
Mm.
rate was higher than it is now when I bought
Wow.
the place. So I'm not a big fan of anyone using that as an excuse because I'm a big believer in controlling what you can control. And interest rates is not one of them, right?
No.
But what you can control is where your money's going. And so, as someone who has dealt with money now for quite a while and helped a lot of first home buyers, generally what I see, and this is going to be controversial and not everyone's going to want to hear this, but the biggest problem is spending. The
Mm,
biggest
Yeah.
problem is spending because I don't know exactly why, but I have a feeling, social media and a whole bunch of this other stuff that now exists, and everyone's got FOMO about all the things that we don't have, as opposed to just taking the time, making the sacrifice to get in early. There's so much noise about just how hard it is, and I'm not discounting that. It absolutely is hard. The other thing that I see is people kind of wanting to skip to the end and getting the dream home initially. That first house that I bought, I fucking hated it. Let me just be clear. I hated it with like every bone in my body, but it was a stepping stone into the market. It enabled the second one that I got beyond that. Um, was it the dream house? Absolutely not. But I do think that focus on getting that off the bat is too strong, realistically.
mm.
And obviously house
I'm
prices massively increased too. So let's be clear on that. My first house, guys, $247,000.
Hmm. Do you think your risk appetite has changed for that kind of decision making? Like, do you think you went in it, I guess, not knowing any better? So it's like, well, this is what I want, so I'm going to get it with, and not really kind of the consequences kind of
Oh, for
be
sure.
forefront. Yeah.
Sure, I talk about that. I talk about
Mm,
just how naive I was,
mm,
just how impatient, impulsive, all of those things. A big part of why I and when I went into finance and why, and we can circle back to that, but
mm,
a big part of why I went about it the way that I did, very much through education, spending the time with people, was because that's what I didn't get. So, first time round, just straight to the bank. Oh, this is what you can get. No help with like looking at the type of property or even just my thought process and thinking about what I was doing. I spend so much time with people now asking them why. Why are you doing this? Why that property? Why that area? Why this? Why that? And making sure that they understand all the potential options as opposed to this is just what you're thinking about now. Cool, this might be what you want. Cool, this might be where we land. But I'm going to also make sure that you're aware of all the other options so that you can make an informed decision as opposed to letting a 21-year-old make the decision. Oh my God, stop. It's like the teacher's letting me choose what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. It's a terrible idea.
it's yeah, it's definitely interesting because I guess I got kind of a similar journey that it was, my parents sent me to find them an investment property at the age of 21. I was like, I got no experience in this. I got no idea what I'm doing. And, but sometimes just actually doing the action is better than trying to over plan. And I think that's where a lot of people get information overload. I don't know if you see that at the moment, where there's just so much information out there. Should you be in Bitcoin or should you be buying a house? Is it cheaper to rent first or is it, owner occupy? I genuinely feel for people that just, are trying to make a decision at the moment just because of all the information that's out there. So it's probably a good segue because I know that Penny Finance is a very educational kind of structure with its mortgage broking. But I understand that wasn't the first role that you had in finance. So I kind of want to understand where you went into mortgage broking. Where did you start? And then we'll get on to the exciting bit of where you are now.
Cool. So I'm at KX. I love KX. I love the owners. I love the franchisees, but I was definitely feeling like a bit of a cat in a cage. And this is just my entrepreneurial spirit. Unfortunately, working in an environment where, I've got a salary cap and you can only do so much. And you just get to a point where you're like, oh, I just feel a bit stuck. And so I decided to do an MBA around that time as well. And that really opened up my eyes. It helped continue to build my confidence around the fact that I kind of did know what I was talking about because I was dealing with an element of imposter syndrome as well. I had all these people listening to me, taking my advice, and I'm kind of like, how the hell do I know what I'm talking about? I'm like, God, do I really? I'm not sure. Anyway, turns out I kind of did know what I was talking about. So that was cool. That piece of paper kind of confirmed that, but just gave me a bigger head start as well, guys. So I did an MBA and then a business mentor of mine who actually was part of my Jets journey as well, he knew that I kind of had a bit of antsy feet. And he was the one that suggested, he's like, Morgs, how about finance? And I'm like, huh? Maths definitely wasn't my strong suit. at school. But he was like, "No, I really think, you love property. You've already done this. People are coming to you for advice already." He's like, "How about becoming a mortgage broker?" I'm like, "What the hell's a mortgage broker?" This is so foreign. He's like, "You can go do your course, and I'm gonna start a business and I want you to run it." And I'm like, okay, all right, let's do it." So took the leave, did the mortgage broking course. Full disclosure, at that time, it took me about a weekend to get done.
Well,
Not very long at all. The barrier to entry is still far too low. Uh, that highlights it. Um, and then the first business that I went into was essentially alongside an existing sister company that had been longstanding 14 years, and they were kind of doing a bit of an attached brand, but rebranded um, to essentially get a connection with one of the major real estate agencies in Melbourne. So anyway, went into that business. There was two directors and then me. And I'm the mortgage broker and I'm running the show and I'm doing everything and I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. Literally. But it's becoming quite a theme. So anyway, head down, bum up, figure it out. And that's what I did. And I all of a sudden figured out that I actually was pretty good at it. Again, understand what people want, where they're at, let them know how you can help, right? And with mortgage broking, what's cool is you're actually giving people what they want, right? You're not selling them something that they don't need. For the most part, they're coming to you because they want to buy a property or they want to consolidate their debt or they're trying to get ahead or they need to understand how to pay it off. And so I very quickly kind of realized that most people were falling into certain kinds of buckets. And then I was sort of creating my own systems and my own processes and my own sort of strategies around the individual situations. Now, everyone is individual, but for the most part, there are ways that I can sort of funnel them down. And so I was kind of formulating that strategy pretty early. I did really well in those first couple of years. The guy that I worked for, learned a lot from him, but the business that got set up ended up imploding. The directors of that business decided to go their separate ways, and I ended up being collateral damage. But I got absorbed into that sort of sister business. Was there for about 18 months before I then went into a different business with a different partnership set up. That too didn't last all that long, realistically. Probably 6 to 12 months, I think, maybe in the grand scheme of things. That ended right at the beginning of COVID. Awful, awful, awful times. Also, the same time I was getting divorced. My whole life was just literally blowing up in my face. And I couldn't really get any worse at that point.
yeah, wow. It's a triple whammy: COVID, divorce, and business loss.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty stressed. But I think, if you reflect back on all the things that I've spoken about, you know, tried, failed, tried something different, tried, gone again, tried something different, so I'd been there before to an extent. And so I think that within your body, when you've been through something, the next time something comes up, you've kind of built up a bit of that resilience, which, makes going back to what you're saying earlier about just kind of getting it done and doing it rather than sort of sitting on the sidelines and watching life go by. I think that's been a huge part of what's enabled me to get to where I have is that I just keep doing it. Like I just keep pressing
Mm.
on. I just keep persevering. I just keep doing it regardless if I've got it all figured out. I kind of do it in spite of not having it all figured out realistically.
Mhm. Yeah. I think, just because I have heard that story about the business, that you had there and the kind of the shared transfers and those types of things that you had, and like, that story to me, and I'll get you to touch on that a little bit just so everyone knows what I'm talking about, but it's just one of those, again, for you, is that you learnt the lesson young, you learnt the lesson what sounds like relatively quickly, and that's obviously just propelled what's the next step for you. So whilst it would have just been such a challenging time, and hopefully that doesn't sound like I'm disregarding, the triple whammy that you're having there, but it would sounds like that was, again, for the lack of a better term, like a bit of a sliding doors moment for you, where you probably learnt lessons that you can listen to as many podcasts as you want, read books and those types of things. But sometimes the learnt lessons are the best ones. But at the time, they
Actually.
feel like, they they feel like the worst thing that is possibly could ever happen to you. So, do you mind just touching on that a little bit, just about how that kind of um, took place, and then I believe Penny was born from there. So, yeah, if that's a perfect segue into getting into what Penny is today, that'd be awesome.
So I went into business with an accountant and a financial advisor who already had existing businesses, so existing accounting firm, existing financial planning firm, and then I was going to come in and have the mortgage broking piece of that puzzle. We were also collaborating on a podcast at that point in time and another sort of educational women's empowerment platform. And so it kind of made sense that as opposed to them referring to me in a different business, that we'd kind of bring all of that in house. So within the mortgage part of the business, the accountant person, he bankrolled the whole lot, which was amazing because at that time I had debt and I had, things to be concerned about. So I couldn't just start from scratch. And so that felt like a bit of a comfy cushion to kind of land on, right?
Mm.
As opposed to starting something from scratch, which I hadn't done before. I'd gone into other people's businesses, I'd turned them around, I'd helped them out, but always with that salary cushion, right? Always with
Mm.
that job security cushion that if I didn't rock up, if I didn't do the thing, I'd get paid. Now, I never did that, but still, there's still an element of comfort there, right? So that's how that business transpired. So I most definitely didn't bootstrap that. Most definitely didn't do that from nothing. There was an existing businesses that were feeding into that. But I also had been a broker for a while now. People were starting to figure out my reputation and were coming as well. So had the shares in that business, but at one point, one of the other people within it just decided that they no longer wanted to go forward with partners anymore and decided that they were going to dismantle it. And I, again, for the second time in not too close a period, was the like collateral damage just off the back of it. And I didn't have any experience. I didn't really know what was in my legal agreements. I didn't really know what any of my rights were at the time. Again, I'd gone into their business. So the brand and everything was already established that was owned by them and attached to them. And so I was looking at the whole thing and I'm like, man, I'm going to end up losing this whole thing and having to start again. And there is a whole lot of detail that we could go into on that, but it would take an entire podcast to do that. So let's not. But
Mm.
essentially, it meant that I had to walk away. And so I'd started that business. We were off and racing. Things were, I thought, going really well. But there was a disconnect happening between sort of the accountant and the way that he liked to do business and then the way that we were doing business. We were podcasting at the time. We were spending time at events and we were sort of, I suppose, anything other than the traditional accountant who all of his accountants were sitting behind their desks. Their time was being tracked. They had to bill particular hours. We were operating in a very different mode than that. And it was just something that he couldn't quite grasp. And so we're just kind of having this conflict. So her and I essentially thought that's what we were going to do. We were going to go and do our own thing until I just got completely cut out from the whole entire thing. But anyway, so fast forward, pretty traumatizing time, but I believe that trauma doesn't have to be traumatizing. I think that everything that you go through in your life there's a lesson to be taken from all of that. And I try to, as much as you have to feel the pain, I don't discount that. You do, you have to sort of sit in that shit for a little bit. I don't like sitting in it for very long before I work out, okay, what's my accountability in all of this? What do I need to do differently next time? And how the hell do I just move on? And money is a big motivator because if you have no longer have money coming in, that comfy cushion that I was telling you guys about, that all of a sudden stopped. Everything that I thought I had was literally evaporated in front of me. And to the point where she even wanted my phone number. And I was like, no, mate, you're not having that. I've had it since I was 16, since I worked at Telstra, got my amazing phone number that everybody loves.
It's got a lot of nines in it, I noticed before. I'm not giving away your number, but just saying.
It's a cool number. It's like, no. But yeah, so look, it just meant that I had to start again. Now, if my family had their way, I would have just gone and got a job.
Mm.
Mum, dad, everyone's screaming at me, Morgan, someone will pay you a lot of money to just go and work for them. Just take the pressure of yourself. Mum was even saying, come home, let me take care of you. Just stop. Pretty much. But I don't know, like, I just couldn't. There was something in me at that time. I was like, "No, I'm not done here. I have more pain than I can withstand, clearly. I'm gonna do it." But this time, I am going to do it my way. This time I am going to do my thing. And I'm not going to let anyone or have a situation where anyone could claim that or take that away from me. So that's when I went to work on figuring out what the next evolution was going to look like. And Penny wasn't where it sort of started. Like, you got to start thinking about what am I going to call myself and how torturous is that as a exercise. Anyone who started a business should be able to relate to that. Like you think you thought of the best name and then you Google like, damn it, it's taken, damn it, it's taken, damn it, it's taken.
I look back at some of ours, and it's like when you, I don't know if you do this, but you go through your camera roll and you see outfits that you tried on. You're like, what was it? It's like those business names. I'm like Talia, once also was going to be green and gold. Like, what?
I know.
Like, you just kind of, and you don't know where you land, but once you do land there, you're like, this is it. But it takes, like, it's harder to name business than to name a child. I'll give you that. Like, it is hard work. Names, you can just have the same child's name, but business, it's so hard. Like, you've got to really think about how other people, it's going to make other people feel, and yeah, crazy.
What it means to you, what it can mean as a brand. Yeah, so many things.
Yeah. And so the origin story of Penny, I was one of my really good friends, very good. He also a financial advisor. We've done lots of work together. He was right there with me, trying to do everything he could to help me get back on my feet and think of all of these names. And my nan is a bit of an origin story about where Penny came from because I was looking for a one word, like a one, just a name, because the finance component of it was definitely where it was going to begin. But I have a big vision for what I see for myself and for the business. And so I didn't want to be restricted just to finance. So I was looking for a single name. Anyway, my nan. I told you earlier that my parents had to go back to work early. So my nan had a really big impact on me because she looked after me a lot when I was young. And she's this little teeny tiny woman. She's passed away many years ago now. But she was full of life, full of life. She'd always be either singing or whistling or skipping down the road and taking us to the milk bar or taking us to the playground. And I just remember her being like one of the most energetic people that you could come across. And anyone just loved her, right? But she used to say, and if we're walking down the road, she'd say, find a penny, pick it up all day long, you have good luck. And that was if we came across like just any dirty little coin on the ground, right? Like clearly it's not an actual penny, but for her and for us and what that taught us was that you can see the good in everything, right? You see something and they can turn your whole day around. There's everyone's complaining and whinging and how hard it all is, yada yada. But all of that's just a choice. Like your thoughts aren't reality, and you can change that for yourself. So I've taken a lot of that into Penny with me. Also about the luck of finding us and that being a big impact on your life. And we will most definitely potentially turn your money around. So anyway, all of that just kind of made sense.
It's a cool name. When I saw the business name, I was like, is it when the penny drops? Is that kind of a thing as well? Because I was like, I was like, oh my god, but like it's got a two-way meaning there. I was like having this like mind blown
Yep.
kind of
When
feeling.
you start to dig into all of the sayings that have penny within them, like there's loads, yeah. But the ones that have sort of stuck with me are the ones that I just have a very personal connection to.
I love that so much. And I'm sorry to you, but the noise is just crazy. So I'm just sitting here actually mute. That is why. So apologies. But no, I love that. And again, because Penny can, like you said, just mean so many different things. And tell us about Penny today. How does your day look? What's happening in the Penny world?
Okay, well, from when I started penning to now, there's also loads of trials and tribulations that have happened between all of that as well. I honestly think the starting of it um, isn't the hard part. Okay, now I can only say that having done that, come out the other side. The starting part is honestly the easy part. You are full of passion, you're full of energy, full of excitement. Everything is new. It's you. So like everyone loves it. You love it. Like there's nothing you can't do any better than the energy that you have at that point in time, right? But then over time, what ends up happening? I've got one. Thanks, Jody. Sorry, guys. They're trying to give me coffee.
You've got a good team.
Yeah, no, they just keep trying to feed me. Um, so yes, rewind. So the start. And then what happens is the business needs to transition. So I'd never set out to create Penny to just be Morgan. I always set out to create Penny to be a company, to be an organization, for me to share not only my knowledge with my clients, but share my systems and my processes with other great people who could then come into Penny. And then we could obviously expand our reach from there, because you, as a single person, you can only do so much with your time, right? And I also wanted to create a very flexible environment as well. You know, if I look at my vision for my life, it's not to be chained to a desk 24/7. It's really not. That's not why I set out to have a business. I wanted to have one where, you know what, if I want to go to Queensland or the bloody Maldives, I'll go, because I can actually work from anywhere. And I purposefully put Penny online from the very, very, very beginning. I also against a lot of advice. So if you go back to 2020 when I started Penny, and the years prior to that when I first worked in that initial business, he was against me being online. He didn't want me to do Zoom meetings. He wanted me to drive to people's lounge rooms and sit there with the dogs jumping on me, the kids jumping on me during dinner, God knows whatever else was happening, and it was bloody awful. But I purposefully put Penny online, and when that happened, just coincidentally happened to be COVID, and so everyone was all of a sudden like, "Oh, what a great idea this is," and having to transition their businesses. And people who had been doing it the old school way, let's say, for a very long time, really struggled with that. And just wanted to get back to being in person. And I was like, guys, just lean in, like lean into this online scenario. So I was marketing online, I was meeting clients online. But again, at the start, lots and lots and lots of passion, all the things, everything's all great. The hard part comes from when you're in the business and things start to go a bit sideways, right? Because I'm not perfect. Like, let's just be clear. There's a lot of things that I'm really great at, and there's a lot of things that I'm really terrible at. But when you're a small business, you only have so much resources. And so you're constantly trying to work out, okay, who do I put in this position, or who should I hire around me, and trying to get that right and keeping them happy, and trying to meet your legal requirements and obligations, and HR this, and cash flow. Like, it's a lot. Meanwhile, all I care about is being a good broker, but also
Mm.
you got to be a good leader, and you got to be all these things as well. Plus, you're never allowed to have a bad day, because when you're a female leader, having a bad day means that you can't, you don't have it all together. And that was something that I have felt pretty intensely along the way, is thinking that you've got the right people on board until something doesn't go quite right, and then all of a sudden exit the building, and then all of a sudden you're just left holding the baby again. And so again, I've had to really look at myself over the time and figure out, where am I going wrong, as well as, like, probably just not the right fit. Because initially, when you start a business, the talent that's attracted to you isn't top tier talent, because why would they be, right? Like, they're off doing their own thing, or they're working for people that have been in the biz for 10, 15, 20 plus years. Who am I? And like, what can I possibly teach them? So, but then as time progresses, and where I finally got to now is a team of absolute A players, and it makes a huge, huge, huge difference. But just going back to the sort of the pain points, there is a pain point that happens where you question everything, where you question whether or not it is worth it. All this hard work, all this grind, you just keep coming up against it. Is it ever going to get any easier? And I think the answer is probably no. I think the answer is it's probably not going to get any easier. You just get better. And if you're not getting better, then that's where you will probably throw in the towel.
Mm. You kind of alluded to it before, and I think with business it kind of is the same. Like, the problems that you see once, they will keep coming, and they come at you in different ways. But because you've seen them before, they don't hit the same. They just, it's just something that you can then just work through. Or you've got the lesson learned from there, so then you can reapply it over and over again. And I often say something very similar. I think, small business is really, really hard because one person goes, and that's your workforce. If you've got 50 people and that person then leaves, then, the other 49 people can kind of carry that load. And even when we started this podcast, Charles, I think someone said to me, it's all good and well starting, but you've actually got to keep going. And that's where I feel like that stat of most businesses don't last longer than 12 months comes from. It's all good and well, so much fun, colors and all the, getting all the systems in place. But when push comes to shove, like, it is really challenging just to keep on top of wearing all those hats that you said, because you can't necessarily pay someone to do all those roles for you. What's the vision for Penny? Your finance at the moment, where would you like to see Penny in 5 years' time?
So yes to the finance piece, but there's a couple of models within that that I've finessed sort of over time. So brokers can work with me in a couple of different capacities now. My role really needs to be not on the tools and writing the loans anymore, and that's definitely a shift I've made this year. So we're in year 5 now, or going into year 6, and that's most definitely a role like I've had to step back from it because I'm better driving the bus. I need to be at the front of the bus, driving the bus, bringing in all of the deals. I can't be bogged down doing nitty-gritty stuff, right? So transitioning to that, putting the right people in the right roles. So I think a mistake that I used to make was finding a person that I liked and being like, "I'll find you a job." So that goes back to them teaching you that hire on personality, not necessarily on skill, but that's incorrect because the first thing you've got to work out is what is the role? Okay. What is the role that fits? What does the business need? What do you need? What's going to drive it forward? And then finding the right person for that, and ideally someone that you actually like and can get along with. Sure. But just finding someone that you like from your random cafe isn't going to check out, right? That's probably not going to have any longevity in
Mm.
it. Some people get lucky, but I kind of doubt that realistically.
That's
So
so fair, and I think it's something that, like, a lot of people when it comes to hiring, like, there's so many business models or mentors or coaches that say, hire slow, fire fast. You can teach people skill, just hire the right people that align with your values, right people, right seat, all these types of things. But some of it is just you've gotta, have something that works for your business, and you know your clients and what they need and what your business needs better than anyone else. So it's about taking pieces of that information and deciding what's going to be best for your business
that's
moving
right, and that
forward.
and
Yeah.
that does evolve over time. Just to be clear, like a small business to be able to have like long, 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 long tenure with people, they've got to be on the bus for the evolution of where that business is going. Because if they started with you when the business and you were a particular subset of you, and then over time as you grow and everything evolves, if they're not going with you, if they don't understand the vision and there's going to be misalignment that happens at some point, like that's where things don't work. And I definitely know with me, especially when I'm very, very stressed, my way of coping is to go inward because I've never really had a scenario where I've had anyone I could really rely on. Anyone that's really sort of understood the gravity of what I'm dealing with. And so I internalize it a lot. Now that can come across potentially cold, that can come across a whole bunch of ways to someone who's not really understanding me, right? But then that's where you get this tug of war of like, honestly, as a female leader, it's really, really hard. It can be really, really challenging. The way that you show up is supposed to be perfect all the time. And I try to be really clear that I'm absolutely not. But that, yeah, again, it's just there's just some things just aren't going to be a fit, and that's okay. And then they're going to move on, and they're going to move on to something probably better for them. And then you're then going to be able to find something that's going to be better for you, and you will have learned along the way as well. So I used to, and I still get very, very emotional when people leave
Mm.
because it's like, why? What have I done? Everyone hates me. You know what? It happens. Just going back to Penny, so the three different sort of ways. So
Mm.
people can come into Penny, be a Penny broker. The way that we have it structured is I provide all the leads and the support. That be admin, that be processing, that be settlements. Um, we have a salary model, we have a contract model, and they also have an affiliate model now. So this is again something that I started doing only a couple of years ago, and I am putting more energy into this. Is what I figured out I'm actually quite good at is people come in, I can give them the system, and then they can go and apply that themselves. And so starting with that, if you're coming in and you think that you can do this thing yourself, you want to be a broker, you want to have your own business, your own brand, let me back you in on that, and we can try to make that work.
Love it. And you've just touched on kind of being a female in what sometimes is maybe a boy's world, for lack of a better term. Um, how I guess what are some of the challenges that you faced with that? And I just want to make note that you're great on socials, which means you're obviously happy to be you, put yourself out there, share your life with people. How do you think being a female in, I guess, the mortgage broking world has shaped you? Has taught you those lessons? Big question. Lots of. I'll let you go wherever you want with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's so many ways I could go with this one. When I first started and you'd go to an industry event, so going back, I was like, what, 26 or something at the time, so close to 10 years ago, and people would be like, assume you're someone's assistant, right? So like you go to an event, oh, who do you work for? And it's like even once I started Penny, it's like, oh, who do you work for? It's like me, like but the assumption is women aren't running mortgage broking businesses, right? In fact, a lot of women aren't even brokers. The stats, and I don't know them off the top of my head, maybe we could look them up, but um, the percentage of female brokers is relatively low. The percentage of female brokers doing commercial finance, which is something that I specialize in, extraordinarily low. The stats on women leaving the industry, extraordinarily high because it's sold as a very flexible job, and it can be. But it also isn't in a lot of ways because what we do is we deal with people's money and we deal with people buying properties and we deal with people under very stressful environments where they need you. So if you just plan on clocking off at 2 o'clock every day to make sure you can do the school run, it's going to become challenging if you don't have the support in behind you because people are probably going to get a little bit frustrated. Now, as women, we have so many extra things to try to manage, which and I've said the whole way through, like I haven't had family yet, but the women who are running their businesses and being brokers and managing their families, and I'm like, I just don't know how you possibly fit all of that in. But look, the men are like they're coming around to the fact that the women are coming for them, right? And a lot of the guys that I know that I circle with are welcoming it. They understand the value that we are providing and it is different. Something about mortgage broking is it's a huge industry. There's so many clients. Like literally everybody is our client. So figure out who you want to target and go do that really well. Like I don't need to compete with the guy next door. I really don't. And I actually don't view any other brokers as competition. Like, might be controversial, but I really don't. I'm in my lane. I'm doing my thing. I'm talking to my community, and that's growing constantly. So I don't need to be worried about if a guy thinks that I'm capable or not. I know I am.
I've got one last question for you, Morgan. I know we've taken up a fair bit of your time today, but I think I saw on Instagram a post that you posted about having the right partner. And hopefully I'm not probing anything too personal here, but it's really relevant because in the real estate world, like I guess as real estate agents, we find it really, really important because you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's flexible to a certain degree. Like you can make your own calendar, but if someone needs you at 7 o'clock at night, you might need to pick up that phone call. Or if, someone needs to have you go, do an inspection on a Sunday, you have to kind of be open to that because people will and love to bring you down if you can't. So I just thought if it's okay, maybe just unpack that a little bit for me about how you think that's really relevant to be a mortgage broker as well.
I don't think it's relevant to just being a mortgage broker. I think that this is relevant to life.
Mhm.
This is something that I can most definitely put my hand up to say that I haven't gotten right numerous times. And to be clear, we're talking about a life partner here, right?
Yes. Yep.
I've also got the business partner thing wrong, which again can be a whole entire other discussion, multiple times. But look, growing up in a country town, growing up very ambitious, growing up, then moving to Melbourne and then having that whole other life and being very career focused and thinking that I can do whatever I want with my life. And, you have boyfriends, during high school. And I talked about that tragedy that I'd had. Like, I didn't necessarily have this perfect picture of exactly what a good partner was supposed to do because in my head, I didn't need anyone, right?
Mhm.
I was going to do it all. I was going to take care of myself. And in fact, I did because
Mhm.
and I probably pushed away a lot of the people who probably would have been better for me because of that hyper independence that I had at a very sort of young age. that stemmed a little bit from my parents getting divorced and having to start again later, and me being like, God, I never, ever, ever want to have a situation where where I'd be left with nothing, and then ha ha ha, happened to me multiple
Mm.
times. But the right partner is a big one. So I think that as I was kind of going through life and meeting people, if I liked you and like, you're filling some sort of void or whatever I had at that time, then, you're on. We're in. Um, and my first husband was a lovely guy, super lovely, great family, great morals, good values, basketball people. And so like my rationale for all of that was, oh, this is normal. This is what it's supposed to look like. I grew up playing basketball, would do basketball all the time, basketball, 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 basketball. This is what it's supposed to be. Cool. Doesn't really matter that he's not got some like high flying job. I'm going to make the money anyway. Cool, 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 cool. But, after a few years, what I really came to understand was that we were just on a different level, just on a different trajectory. And the goals and the ambitions and everything that I had for my life just was so outrageous that not outrageous to me, but outrageous to him and outrageous to his family. And so I was constantly feeling like I was being put in like, get back into the cage things, kind of like, calm down, Molly. No, you don't need that. You don't need that. That's ridiculous. And I was like, oh, no, but I actually really do want this. And so then move past that, and that was relatively amicable too. He and I decided that, it wasn't quite right at that point in time, and that was okay. Moving on next, that was a catastrophe. It actually got, significantly worse for me after that for the next few years. This is all while starting Penny. This is all while going through COVID. And it was actually my ex-husband. It was like, "Maureen, you're about to do it again. Like, this is not going to be right for you. This is not going to be right for you." And I was like, "Oh, as if, because that next scenario was very exciting, very new. And all of a sudden I was like reinvigorated and I was starting Penny and I was focused on that anyway. So I think this is what's quite silly about all of this, and like hindsight's this bloody wonderful thing where a partner was like someone who was like fun to be around, and like that was enough for me at the start. And then all of a sudden you realize that you're the one pouring in and you're pouring in and you're pouring in, you're pouring in, and you're doing all of this stuff. And you're like, then you get to a point and you're like, wait, hold on. What am I getting back from
Mm.
all of this? And why do I feel constantly drained, like all the time? This just feels like utter chaos, and I'm supporting everyone, but yet no one's supporting me. And so, like, I'm trying to run this business with like multiple hands tied behind my back, with my bank account being drained, and just like this I'm not going to again be able to get to the level that I want to get to and achieve my goals if I don't have someone on my goddamn team. Someone
Mm.
who gets it, someone who can go with me. And then I was kind of at a point where I was like, you know what, I need someone better than me. Like, where do I find someone better than me? Where are they out there, have already achieved so much stuff, who can teach me something, who can provide that bit of a goddamn comfy fucking mattress for just 5 minutes? And I'm not asking for any handouts. I'm not, but I am now finally in a scenario where I have an actual partnership and someone who does want to see me win and isn't um at all trying to tear me down. So that's nice.
And that is such a nice note to end on because it's been a real roller coaster kind of hearing, some of the absolute triumphs you've had and then obviously some of the challenges that you've faced, Morgan, both personally and in your career so far. And we love to see women being so successful. So we really do appreciate you joining us today. We are going to finish up with it. We'll do two rapid fire questions. I'll do one and then Charles, who's sitting next to a highway. Sorry, Charles, you had to be on mute for most of the pod there, but I was in my element. So hopefully that was okay. My question for you, Morgan, is with your flexibility, what is your go-to holiday destination?
Well, my dream was the Maldives, and I got to go there earlier this year,
Well
and
done.
it
That's
was
awesome.
as insane as you think.
That's so cool.
Love that so much. And last question, what is if there is anything, what is one thing that you can't go a day without doing or having?
Coffee, guys, always.
Yeah, I think your team knows that. They've given you 2 coffees in these episodes. I think that it's like, if we just give her coffee, she'll be fine. Well, Morgan, Owen, thank you so much for joining us. It was an awesome episode. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you.